Full disclosure, the voice you are listening to now is artificially generated, brought to you by satisphonic.com. See the link in the description for more details. What does the wealthiest person you know do for work? A family friend retired after being a COBOL programmer for 30 years. About 2 years after his retirement, a company came to him and said, "Name your salary," and he requested around $1.05 million a year. He was hired on the spot and still works there. Pick an obscure programming language, write lots of important code, and don't comment or document anything. A family member worked at various companies. He told me this is very common. It's not obscure programming languages, just that they know what's going on, and don't let anyone else near it or something. It can be difficult, even if you wrote it, to discern what it's doing, or where the information came from, or where it goes from one point to another. And don't comment or document anything. Please don't do this. But the code is the documentation. Damn me for becoming a Fortran expert. I know this is a blatant disregard for the S, but in case anyone reading past is looking for a COBOL-like career path, Fortran is heavily used in supercomputers and is an area of active computer science research. If you want to play with supercomputers in heavy science and engineering contexts, it's not a bad language to learn. You don't even need to know a whole ton of it either. It's an in-demand language, and often the organization is willing to do on-the-job subject matter training if you bring a functional level of Fortran and math physics skill. In my particular organization, they'll go after anyone with Fortran experience and just teach them the specific discipline, and this is a data product that every single person in America uses multiple times per week. And if you're younger, though nobody will say it, you're even more in demand because you're bringing modern software engineering and design patterns to the language. If you're fresh out of college as a CS major and know Fortran, you can get into some crazy companies and they'll invest pretty heavily in you. Everyone wants to make crappy 100 megabyte single page web apps that are clones of existing products. So finding people who want to do optimization and hard comp sci projects is pretty hard at the moment. Fortran is preferred in some settings over C or ASM because how heavily optimized the compilers are. Since it's somewhat more limited in syntax than C, it can be more predictably optimized. Since it is high level, you don't have to know all of the non-obvious optimizations that would be implemented in ASM. This makes it ideal for doing applied math like linear algebra and numeric integration on cluster computer. Yep. My wife taught herself to work on legacy systems, does assembler work on mainframes for banks, stock markets, etc. They're like two schools on the planet who still teach what she does, and most everyone in the field is a retirement age white dude, so she enjoys a lot of leverage in her position. My dad did the same thing. He was a COBOL programmer in the 70s. 90s for a big 3 company, and after he retired was able to land a ton of lucrative gigs helping companies who needed to interface with ancient computer systems. In hindsight, this kind of thing really ought to be taught about in school. I bet that in 30 years' time, elite hackers will be getting offers of 10 million bit per annum to maintain the bits of JavaScript that makes the cat do a funny dance animation. The wealthiest person I know and hang out with regularly built a company, its services, and then sold it for several $100 million. He now runs a company that does the same kind of its services in a different field. He figured out a winning business formula and is just repeating it in a different market. We know the same person. This is how my uncle went from normal person to 100 mile in his bank in a span of 10, 15 years. I want to know the formula now. Ravioli, ravioli. Look at foundational tech that is heavily utilized by specific industries. COBOL is and probably will be the de facto for the finance industry for quite a long time. Imagine Chase trying to migrate away from it. Hell, I've watched small companies using homespun comm systems struggle to migrate to Salesforce in under 6 months. The scale large financial institutions are reliant on their COBOL systems would mean probably 10 or 20 years minimum for a proper and fully vetted migration to take place. And even then, they'd probably still keep the COBOL systems running in a synced unison to check against reliability, stability, and if I'm not mistaken, most accurate floating point system. So find that unicorn and specialize in it. You'll stay employed as long as you choose, or just learn COBOL and don't waste the time to find something different. Pig farmer. I kid you not. He's my father's old friend. I visited him once when my father and I were passing through the state. He lives in a modest classic farmhouse with his wife, both in their 70s. I mentioned I was starting a school in West Africa as we were catching up. A few weeks later, I got a text asking how much it would cost. I told him Fortic, thinking it was really nice of him if he wanted to send a few dollars. I got a check for Fortica. I thought it would take me years to raise that. I'm typing this from Sierra Leone because he also paid for the house I thought would take years to raise funds for. That's so lovely. A lot of people underestimate the wealth of farmer. I am from Germany, and in the Black Forest, there are a lot of farmers that have made a lot of money because of the property they had in the past. Of course, a lot of farmers don't have property, but the farmers actually don't flex with the money like other famous people. I like these people. What's going on in Germany and USA? In France, our farmers are committing suicide because they don't make ends meet. Wow, that's really fucking awesome on both your parts. It's a guy I work with. He started with one Jimmy John's franchise and turned it into 10 franchises. Ran them for 10 years, then sold them all and dumped the money into the stock market and real estate. He did this all while working as an airline pilot, currently still working at the airline. This dude owns and flies his own private jet on top of all that. So impressive. I can barely manage my one-day job without even having kids. Some people are just built different. How they handle stress and how rewarded their brain gets by doing stressful tasks is the difference between guys like him and guys like you and guys like you and me. Inherited small factory from his father, developed it to huge nationwide company, still goes to work there every day despite being worth hundreds of millions. My friend sold RuneScape Gold. He made a fortune. This was not the answer I was expecting, but the answer we all needed. I have $92 and I'm halfway to $99. RuneScape math checks out. Own their own conveyor belt business. Makes almost $2 million a year after it's all said and done. Moves money around, eh? I know the owners of the Four Seasons hotel chain and the owner of Canada Goose. You win. I thought Bill Gates and the Saudi prince are the majority stakeholders of the Four Seasons hotels. But they are. I'm assuming it means Isidore Sharp, though, the founder of Four Seasons, since he also owns or owned Canada Goose. He does still loosely work for and is affiliated with Four Seasons, but I believe he's just a board member and shareholder these days. Gates has the majority stake these days. Then the Saudis. It was his divorce gift to himself is the inside joke, since apparently Melinda loves Four Seasons hotels and he bought the brand right after they divorced. Goose down 80% in past 5 years. What gives? Everyone has one already and they last forever. Both in tech. Friend is in a company about to IPO and is VIP level, so will do well there. Her husband just sold his company, gaming company, to the biggest gaming company in China for, as she put it, life-changing money. Both very intelligent, super nice, crazy hard-working. They worked for it and it couldn't happen to nicer people. Sold to Tencent. Better than being sold for 10 cents. Everyone has one already, and they last forever. They inherited a huge corporation. They just don't have to F it up. Edit. The grandson of the founder currently runs it. He has a sister and a brother as well. They own 10 auto dealerships and other things like a winery. The grandson told me in a meeting once that he knows he'd be working in a bank or as an accountant or something if he wasn't born into the family. Is their name Billy Madison? Billy Madison is an inspirational story about how you can do whatever you want if your parents are billionaires. Even if he became a teacher, like he stated he would at the end of the film. It's not like he's going to be living on a teacher's paycheck. Truck driver, starting his own trucking company. Tons of money in trucking business. An owner of one in my city, drives a Porsche 980. Well, that sounds like a shitty car for trucking. Foe of a large public company. He works 80-hour weeks. Fuck that. I know the CBO of an international bank. He works a minimum 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. On Sundays he only works 8 hours. In his downtime he's on standby for any issues that may crop up, to the point where he once responded to a client within 50 minutes. At 3:45 am. He's working when I'm sleeping. He's working when I'm at lunch. He's working when I'm at lunch. He's working while flying abroad to visit family. He's working during car rides in between meetings with said family. He's working while working, co-attending 2 separate meetings while replying to clients. I have no idea how he works so hard and yet remains so calm. He's basically a Swiss Army C-suite, since he does everything from sales to tactical planning to its support to shareholder discussions. When I talk to him about it, his response is, "I'm only 51. I'm still young." He also has a high-needs child, so his work hours are 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., so that he can fetch his child from the daycare, since his office is closer to the daycare than his wife's. That man is borderline superhuman. My mother worked in it for a very large American multinational. She knew, and I met, countless number of these people over the years. Most of them were either dead, divorced, or had a serious health breakdown by 60. I'll say this now, if anyone has a friend that fits this description, it's worth having a chat with them about what matters in life before it's irrelevant, how much money you make, or projects you land, if your kids who barely know you are by your gravesite. I work for a lady who inherited her own 100-mile. She just buys real estate and sets them up as rentals. I just do general maintenance on them. I also rent from her. She lives like she's on a pension and pays me in magic beans half the time. A true embodiment of money does not buy happiness. I have tried many times to push her to go enjoy being so wealthy, but she lives with a mindset that because she does not have a partner, why bother buying a villa in Tuscany or jump on a flight to Bora Bora just to enjoy the beach and a nice seafood banquet. So she tends to sit on her couch and drink wine with the TV on in the background. I got a shock one day when she emptied a pillow slip of Krugerrands onto her kitchen bench. As it turns out, she has somewhere in the range of 2.5 mil in Krugers, Maples and Sovereigns just sitting in pillow slips in her walk-in wardrobe. You realize that this is the part where you become her partner and inherit the 100, right? Here, nah, she's an old duck. It would be a Martha Ray deal, although she was very attractive when she was young. Now make love to that rubber duck and get set. You have to slay a few dragons to get to the princess brother. Get out there and earn it. My buddy owns a cybersecurity and general tech firm here in town. Small town, hardly any competition. He's a badass marketer, so he has contracts with the state's NFL team and the largest Porsche dealer in the southeast. He also owns a salvage yard, oddly enough. He balls and he's so farm cool. His employees all get a track day once a year and box seats to the biggest games. He's also generous within town initiatives like toy drives and tech donations to public schools in the ghetto and the town sped school. Additionally, he invites the community out to free meals he hosts in his office space, which is gorgeous. He hires pizza and hot dog carts and lets people walk up and get a plate. For his buddies, he turns the office space, which has a friggin' basketball court in it, into movie viewing Emma Fight Night watch spots. There's a theater in there. He charges nothing, has stuff catered in, and has a full bar. Wants nothing in return but for everyone to have a good time and get home safe. He's a fantastic father to his teenage daughter too. The way she adores him, dotes on him, picks lint off his suit, fixes his hair. He's been so gentle with her all her life, and she's growing up to be just as gentle as cool as her dad. Damn, I just wrote a love letter, lol. But no, I just admire someone who genuinely cares about people and doesn't let money go to his head. He's been awesome. Now, if you have it in you, I'll send you her. Tim was my Uber ride. Tim is retired at 53. Tim paid for his daughter's college and graduate degree. Tim has 2 houses. Tim doesn't drive and thinks the $5,060 extra on top of my fare is fair price. I took Tim to the casino. Tim tipped me 100 and Tim refused to tell me what he did for work edit. Wow, that's a lot of comments. More info. He said his current tax bracket is 25% income, 96 to 190. Him the driver, not him lot. I was basing everything he said as to gauge how wealthy he was. I never asked what he did for work, BC. With that much money, you don't just tell people secrets, and it seemed rude at the time. He was pretty open about telling me about himself. I picked him up from a bank where he works as a teller. He does it to keep himself busy. Tim is a fucking mob boss. Tim is a fucking mob boss, works in waste management. Whatever he wants, he was an NFL quarterback though, so he doesn't have to do jack shit these days. Found a diamond mine in the Newt. I'm just too jealous to read anymore. Be seeing you all later. They own a large construction company based in rural NZ, employ heaps of people, are very generous to their hometown, humble too. One of the first 100 employees of Microsoft. I was friends with a guy from a rich family. They lived on a lake with a private dock, multi-million-dollar home. Microsoft guy was their neighbor. They used to have these game nights where we'd all get together, have cocktails and play pretty silly games. Cards Against Humanity, Pictionary, that kind of thing. I was really, really good at these games, and it impressed Microsoft guy. He wrote me a glowing letter of recommendation praising my intelligence because of this. It helped me, an immigrant, land an engineering job at a huge aerospace company. I've worked on multiple satellites that are currently in orbit, and I've touched stuff that's on the surface of Mars now. Hell, I was able to buy a house before I turned 30, all because this man thought I was clever and witty and wanted to help me out. Needless to say, the imposter syndrome I feel every day is unbelievable. So satellites that you have worked on are currently operating in space. Something you touched has made it all the way to another planet to perform its functions. Imposter syndrome, nothing, dude. You are the real deal. So you got a bump, others might not, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve your seat. It just means you are recognized for who you are. I get the Microsoft reference. Yeah, I know it's not helpful, but I find it funny when a guy whose stuff made it to space says he has an imposter syndrome. Like, what are the rest of us supposed to even do, then Lofi? My wife's second cousin was apparently Microsoft's first receptionist. Employee 50 or so, they offered her various levels of stock v cash. She took the job to get some time out of the house from the kids. Her husband was a doctor or whatnot and said, yay, take the stock and see what happens. Rich beyond the dreams of Croesus. A great example of the difference a safety net makes. Another woman who didn't have a doctor husband would have taken cash because she needed to make sure the bills were paid and couldn't afford the risk. Cool story, and hope you can smash that imposter syndrome into orbit too. Live off of generational money doesn't work at all. Optimal lifestyle. Screw having to work for a living. I hope you remember to help out others like he did you. We could really use it in this world. The first is a self-made multimillionaire who's owned his own concrete finishing business since he was about 19. The second is a self-made millionaire who became a very successful accountant who was continually promoted at work. He consistently bought stock. Real estate from a young age. The last person is a millionaire who will inherit family money, where she's a high-end real estate agent. I met this guy at one of the literature events in Moscow in 2015. He promoted himself as a poet, but when we started talking more, he said that he is the owner of a London-based risk management consulting company. I checked, it was true. We were friends for several years, traveling with our families together and other stuff. He lived a really rich life. And periodically, in his conversations, there were words about his personal acquaintance with members of the British royal family, as well as with the top leadership of Russia. At the end of the year 2021, he was depressed, saying that hard times coming, etc. In June 2022, he moved from Moscow to his suburban mansion. And a few weeks after Russia committed full-scale war on Ukraine, I got to know that he had died in strange circumstances from a stomach hemorrhage. Too much polonium tea. Worked for a tech company and got paid bonuses for years in the form of company stock. He and his wife decided that when the stock hit $60, they'd sell all his shares. It was somewhere around $5, $10 for most of the years he worked. It suddenly started rising in 98 and mid-99 hit $60. They sold millions worth of stock. Then the company's value burst, along with a lot of other tech companies, during the dot-combust. If they'd waited a week, their values would have been worthless. They reinvested the money and diversified everything, and have been living comfortably ever since. He still works, 60, 70-hour weeks, because he likes working. Howe owns a few Taco Bells and lives on a hill we call Taco Hill. His wife has big tits now. My ex-father-in-law used to own a huge factory that made Nike and Adidas shoes in the 80s and early 90s. That's right, sneakerheads. Big sneakerheads. Big sneaker companies don't actually make any of these shoes. Sure, they design them, but they outsource them to an OEM manufacturing plant company in Asia, pivoted to real estate investments developments. Imagine having the two buy real estate and land at 80s and 90s prices, and is now worth $150 mile. Complete hypocrite and a sociopath though. treated service workers like slaves, Rudolph, and was a generally unpleasant person to be around. Sure, he's rich, but he sure seemed unhappy all the time. My dad, he does a bunch of random things. He retired from the Navy and uses his retirement pay to invest in real estate. He became a photographer after retiring and did really well for himself. Now he has contracts with a load of schools and sells off temporary subcontracts to budding photographers for schools he doesn't have the time to work with. He flips cars in his spare time, but right now his day job is high school business teacher. Wealthiest I know is myself. Make a little over 120 being a ups driver. They don't work. They own things. That's how wealthy people make their money.